Somewhere in the forested hills of Tamil Nadu, beneath stone, silence, and 10,000 years of forgetting, a story was waiting. No words, no ruins, just color. Lines etched by firelight, shapes painted by hands long turned to dust. Imagine a team of archaeologists brushing away moss and dust, uncovering something truly extraordinary. Figures of humans dancing, hunting, gathering. Animals with bowed heads and broad horns. Scenes of life frozen in time. And in that moment, history blinked. Because what they had found wasn't just art, it was a message left by people who lived before metal, before written language, before kingdoms, yet felt the same impulse we still do today: to express, to remember, to be seen. In today's episode of Wonders of Science, we are stepping into one of the oldest galleries in human history to explore how this remarkable discovery in Tamil Nadu, India, may just reshape what we know about prehistoric life in India. Who were these early artists? What do their images reveal? And how do we, thousands of years later, even begin to understand what they were trying to say? Stay with me, because sometimes the past doesn't whisper, sometimes it paints. Picture this: June 23rd, 2025, the air on Yelagiri hills in western Tamil Nadu held something ancient. A group of local villagers were going about their day when they noticed something unusual. There were white markings and shapes on rock walls inside a hidden cave, nearly 1,000 feet above ground at a place called Rediyur. They immediately alerted Dr. A. Prabhu, a Tamil professor from Sacred Heart College, and his team from Tirupattur Heritage Conservation Center. With permission from the forest department, these researchers trekked up steep slopes, pushing through the dense forest canopy. It was an ascent as much through time as through terrain. What they found inside that cave, spanning nearly 100 square meters, was absolutely breathtaking. More than 80 faded yet still vivid figures. They were painted in mysterious white pigment, depicted dancers, warriors atop animals, leopards being attacked, and even tribal leaders carried on palanquins. All captured in dynamic scenes of what appears to be everyday Neolithic life. Now, you might be wondering, how did they know these paintings were so ancient, dating back somewhere between 10,000 to 3,000 years BCE? It wasn't guesswork, not at all. So there were a few clues. Let's check them out. The dynamic human and animal figures found at Yelagiri closely match other Neolithic Indian art traditions, particularly those from well-known central cave sites. It's like finding a signature style that you recognize. The cave's elevation and its secluded layout suggested it wasn't just a simple shelter. It hinted at communal or ritual use, something very typical of hunter-gatherer societies from Neolithic times. And here is the interesting twist. There's also an Iron Age element present. They found depictions of straight weapons, also painted in white, which are typical of early metal-using communities. This suggests a remarkably long period of use for the site, perhaps starting as early as 10,000 BCE and continuing for a millennia. In short, these paintings bridge multiple layers of prehistory: offering us an incredible window into the lives of people who lived, hunted, danced, and worshipped on these very hills thousands of years ago. So, how exactly do we know how old these paintings are? After all, there is no timestamp on the cave wall, no date etched next to the figures saying painted in the year 9781 BCE. Instead, archaeologists become incredible detectives. And the clues? They are hidden in the pigments, the style, the location, and sometimes the very dirt itself. Let's break it down in a much more simpler manner. First, researchers compare the style of paintings to others we already dated. The figures at Yelagiri, those tall humans with curved arms and weapon-like shapes, and animals with exaggerated horns, closely resemble art found in other parts of India, like Bhimbetka and Sittanavasal, whose timeline are much more clearly established. When many of these traits overlap, things like posture, materials, and subjects, archaeologists can begin to estimate a reliable age range, in this case between 10,000 and 3,000 years BCE. Then they look at the art where it is found. The altitude of the cave over 1,000 feet up, and its isolation suggests it wasn't for everyday shelter. It might have been a ritual site, a sacred space, or even an early social hub. These kind of uses were more common in the Neolithic period, when humans lived in tribes. They hunted, they gathered, and were just beginning to experiment with settlement. The absence of later additions like writing or detailed metal tools also helps confirm that this site stayed untouched for millennia. Now for the science part. The actual pigments used. In some cases, scientists can scrape microscopic amounts of paint, analyze the organic materials inside, like charcoal or animal fat used as binder. These can be then dated using radiocarbon dating. However, in case of Yelagiri, the pigment appears to be made of natural white minerals, likely lime or crushed calcium-rich stone. Since this contains no carbon, it's trickier to radiocarbon date directly. But, and this is the key, if the pigment was layered over any organic residue, say soot or plant matter from ancient fires, then that underlying layer can be dated. Finally, there's soil and rock around these paintings. Sometimes ancient microfossils, ash, or tiny plant fragments get trapped in the cracks and beneath the flakes of rock. When analyzed, they help date when the cave was last inhabited and when the wall was exposed, which narrows down the timeline for the artwork itself. So while we have not exactly the laser stamped date, we have a convergence of evidence. The shapes and symbols match those from the dawn of human art. The site suggests early ritual and community behavior. The materials used to tell a story of what was available and how it was mixed and applied. When all these clues align, we land on a truly remarkable estimate. And what's truly fascinating, that these weren't just doodles. They were messages, a way for humans, much like us, to say we were here and we mattered. So now that we know paintings are likely over 10,000 years old, the question becomes, what do they show? And even more intriguing, what do they mean? These aren't just scribbles on a wall. They are storytelling, communication, and a kind of a prehistoric cinema captured in white strokes and stones. One of the most prominent features is the presence of tall human shapes, dozens of them. Some appear to be dancing, arms raised, legs bent in motion. Others are riding animals, possibly bulls or horses, holding what look like to be weapons and tools. There's one even striking figure carried on a sort of a palanquin, a platform borne on the shoulders of others. Now that's fascinating. Why? Because it may point to a social structure, someone of status being honored or celebrated. That's not just art, that's a window into early leadership, perhaps even ritualistic culture. Then there are beasts. You will find depictions of cattle, leopards, and other four-legged animals, some shown being hunted or herded. These scenes hint at a society transitioning between hunter-gatherer and early herding stages. This was a pivotal period when animals weren't just food, but the very foundation of emerging livelihoods. And in some places, you see animals and humans together, not in combat, but what appears to be harmony. That may suggest a kind of spiritual symbolism. Were these animals sacred? Were they a part of their stories, totems, gods? We may never fully know, but the questions certainly stir the imagination. All of these scenes were painted using chalky white pigment, probably made from crushed limestone. What's truly remarkable is that despite the passage of thousands of years, the relentless rain, the whipping wind, the scorching heat, the lines still remain. That's not just the evidence of artistry, that's evidence of intention. These weren't meant to vanish, they were meant to last. Imagine the people who painted these walls. No alphabets, no scrolls, no tablets, no satellite, and yet they had a language. A language made of movement, of shapes, of memory. They recorded hunts, they celebrated rituals, they passed down knowledge, not with ink, but with image. And thanks to those painted figures, we see across time, not through telescope, but through art. What do these images, drawn by hands thousands of years ago, really tell us about the people who lived in these Yelagiri hills? Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. The individuals who painted these scenes weren't just primitive wanderers. They were part of a thriving, organized community, one that hunted, gathered, and possibly even herded animals. A society that had its own forms of celebration, storytelling, and even ceremony. We often think of these prehistoric humans as silent figures, grunting in caves, chasing mammoths. But here is a powerful reminder. These people were us. They expressed themselves, they remembered things, they created something that was meant to be shared, not just seen. The dancing figures, they suggest music or ritual. The hunting scenes, that's coordination and maybe even strategy. The animals and leaders, signs of social hierarchy, of respect, of memory. India's ancient past has often been viewed through the lens of later civilization, the Indus Valley, the Vedic age, and so on. But discoveries like the Yelagiri paintings push our timeline deeper, reminding us that organized culture in the subcontinent didn't begin with script or bronze. It began with stone and story. It also challenges the idea that the early art was confined to central India or the Himalayas. The fact that such advanced caved art has now been found deep inside Tamil Nadu shows that southern India was just as culturally rich, perhaps even a parallel cradle of civilization. And here's the most humbling part. 10,000 years ago, on the other side of the planet, in places like France, Australia, and Africa, humans were painting on cave walls too. Different continents, different climates, but the same impulse: to draw, to tell a story, to leave something behind. And here in Tamil Nadu, we have just uncovered a new verse in that shared global poem, written not in words but in white pigment on ancient stone. This discovery isn't just a find, it's a connection between us and them, between now and then, between what we think we know and what we are just beginning to learn. Because history isn't something we read in books. Sometimes it's something we uncover, brushstroke by brushstroke. And sometimes it reminds us that even 10,000 years ago, we were already telling stories. We often look to the stars to understand where we came from. But sometimes the most profound answers lie right beneath our feet in the quiet caves of Tamil Nadu, surrounded by wind and stone. The earliest humans of this land left behind not weapons, not tools, but art. And in that art, in those figures dancing, hunting, and reaching, we find something deeply familiar. Not just survival, but expression. Not just life, but meaning. They didn't have telescope or time machines, but through a handful of chalky strokes, they sent a message not to gods, not to kings, but to us. To say, we were here, we loved, we feared, we wondered, just like you. And somehow, that message traveled through thousands of years of silence and arrived today in your ears. This has been Wonders of Science. Thank you for listening and for walking with me through a piece of humanity's oldest story. If this episode moved you, inspired you, and made you see the earth a little bit differently, please consider sharing it. Leave a review. Let's bring more people into the wonder. Until next time, this is your host Arindam Banerjee, who says keep exploring, keep wondering, and never forget. Sometimes the earth remembers more than we do.